By the late 1920s, Al Capone, boss of the Chicago mob, was at the height of his power. Then, in 1931, he was stripped of his empire and sent to prison. 2 years later, another crushing blow to organized crime, prohibition was repealed, and the mob's primary source of income dried up. Would the Chicago mob survive? Join us for The Legacy of Al Capone.
Chicago, 1926. At a lavish suite in a Michigan Avenue hotel, the most powerful man in the city of big shoulders holds court. Scarface Al Capone, nicknamed for the scar he got in a barroom fight. From here, he rules an empire built on bootlegging, gambling, and murder. Down in the lobby waits Capone's new bodyguard, an Italian upstart named Tony Accardo. For Accardo, this dangerous assignment is the chance of a lifetime. The lessons he learns from Capone will serve him well. In Chicago, Capone is king. He oversees a criminal organization unlike any other.
Bear in mind, the Capone gang was not the mafia. The mafia was in New York. This was not a family Italian, Sicilian thing. This was a general gang. This is why it was always called in Chicago the outfit, the boys.
It's a pragmatic, functioning business organization that handles a variety of things from gambling and extortion, guns, women, sort of name it and claim it.
Capone's racket is taking in about $70 million a year, mostly from bootlegging. Well-placed bribes keep the police at bay. Capone's reach even extends to City Hall.
At the time of Al Capone's reign, we had a mayor, Big Bill Thompson. He was so much owned by Al Capone that he actually had a picture of Al Capone hanging in his office. When things needed to be done, government-wise or even law enforcement-wise, Capone would get it done. He would pick up the phone.
Scarface seeks out the spotlight, mugging for photographers, giving interviews. He is a flashy hoodlum, living out a dark version of the American dream.
All these young gangsters were looking for the opportunity to become part of this nationally recognized organized crime affiliate. It is wealth. It is living right. It is the flashy cars, flashy clothing, the lifestyle that these gangsters emulated and that the young people wanted to be part of.
Capone's bodyguard, Tony Accardo, is one of these ambitious young wise guys. Born in 1906, he is the son of a shoemaker, the second of 6 kids. Tony grows up in a rough Italian neighborhood on the city's near west side. As a teenager, he joins a group of local tough guys known as the Circus Gang.
The thing about these gangs of immigrant kids, they ran the streets, they stole, they got in trouble. If they could get a gun, they'd use it. If they could get a car, they'd use it.
He also delivers liquor for the neighborhood bootleggers that supply Capone's outfit and ends up being recommended to Scarface himself.
He was a soldier, he was effective, he was dutiful, he was well-liked and respected because when he was asked to do something, he did it.
In Accardo, the outfit sees a killer. His weapon of choice? The baseball bat. According to legend, Scarface hears that Accardo has beaten 2 men to death and gives him a nickname.
His friends called him Joe Batters, or JB. That nickname derived from the fact that he would batter his opponents unmercifully. He was a tough customer as a young man.
By the late 1920s, Joe B has been promoted to Capone's bodyguard and chauffeur.
You didn't see Al until the coast was clear. Nobody got a shot at Al because nobody got close to him because of guys like Accardo. That's what he was paid to do. He was paid to be a big, tough, gun-toting thug.
The time he spends at the boss's side gives Accardo a window into the mysterious workings of the Chicago mob. One of the mysteries that still remains to this day, did young Tony Accardo take part in the most famous gangland killing in American history? The story begins in February 1929 when Capone decides to eliminate his major competition for Chicago's bootleg liquor trade. a North Side Irish gangster named Bugs Moran. On the morning of Thursday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, 4 of Capone's hitmen storm the garage that serves as Moran's headquarters. 2 are dressed as cops. They line the Moran men up against a wall and tell them it's a raid. Then they open fire with their Tommy guns, leaving all 7 dead. No one is ever charged with the murders. Today, some mob historians believe Tony Accardo may have been one of the killers.
He certainly, at that stage of his life, was a shooter, a carrier of guns, and he rose up in the organization, I think in part because he was willing to kill people.
So the people that they sent on a mission, like the mission that St. Valentine's Day Massacre turned out to be, had to be the best people around, the best people available. And that says a lot for Tony Accardo.
One thing is certain. The publicity that follows the massacre is bad for the outfit, especially for Al Capone. Chicago's leading businessmen, many of whom have been happily drinking Capone's bootleg liquor, are shocked by the killing. Scarface is starting to ruin the city's reputation. They take their case to the new president, Herbert Hoover, and urge him to do something. A group of agents from the Justice Department goes into action. Led by Elliot Ness, they refuse to take bribes, unheard of in Chicago, and become known as the Untouchables. They do manage to confiscate some of Capone's beer, but it's not bootlegging that finally does Capone in. In the summer of 1930, an IRS agent named Frank Wilson makes a breakthrough. In a ledger kept by one of Capone's bookkeepers, he finds proof of a portion of the mob boss's multi-million-dollar income, money on which Capone has never paid taxes. Capone is indicted, tried, and convicted for tax evasion.
Here he comes. The big boy himself. What's the hurry, Al? Where you're going, you'll have loads of time.
In 1933, things get even worse. Prohibition is repealed. Suddenly, the outfit loses its best racket.
The money-generating aspects of Prohibition were not there, and it left a big void in organized crime coffers. So they had to look to different avenues, and they needed some very heady people to get involved in the running of organized crime.
The rest of the 1930s are tough times for the outfit. Replacing Big Al is not easy. The reins are handed to his trusted lieutenant, Frank Nitti, and Nitti's associate, Paul the Waiter Ricca. But in 1943, Ricca goes to jail, and Nitti commits suicide. If Capone's outfit is going to survive, it will need a leader as shrewd and as tough as Scarface Al. That person will be Tony Joe Batters Accardo, who spent the 30s as one of the outfit's most trusted enforcers.
There was definitely a vacuum at the top, and Accardo was smart enough and ruthless enough to grab it. The combination of being a very crafty individual, and I think an intelligent individual and a realistic individual. Throw those together with a little luck, and you had yourself a mob leader.
When we continue, rumors of the outfit's demise prove to be greatly exaggerated.
As long as there's gambling, as long as there are ways to get a piece of a contract or insinuate yourself into a labor union, organized crime has a reason to live.
In the mid-1940s, Tony Joe Batters Accardo steps into a power vacuum and takes over as the head of the Chicago mob. He's a worthy successor to the legendary Scarface Al.
You didn't screw with Joe B. That rock-solid discipline, that ability to back up threats with violence, with action, was, I think, what he brought to the table.
Anthony Accardo was a very rough man. His mannerisms were rough, his body language was rough, the tone of his voice was rough. And it frightened me. Out of all of the men that I have ever known, he was the one that I feared the most.
As Capone's young bodyguard, Accardo watched his boss go from celebrity gangster to inmate at Alcatraz. The way Tony saw it, Capone's mistake was that he allowed himself to become a public figure, drawing attention from the feds.
Tony Accardo learned as much from Al Capone by understanding that he wanted to be what Al Capone was not. He returned to the older tradition of organized crime, which is to be in a society, be a parasite in the society, but don't disturb the host.
One way the new boss of the Chicago outfit avoids the press is by living in the suburbs. The only luxury he allows himself, this lavish home in River Forest, complete with a bowling alley. Tony is known as a faithful husband and a doting father to his 4 children. He presents himself as just another businessman. If anyone asks, he says he's a beer salesman.
You didn't see Tony Accardo with showgirls and diamonds. He was behind the scenes and quiet and careful. And I think that kind of considered caution was a reflection of how smart he was. And it is an explanation for how successful he was.
Accardo always was insulated very well, so anybody who would take the heat would be the soldiers or the middlemen. He didn't take the heat himself.
When Accardo takes charge in the mid-1940s, the Chicago outfit still hasn't found a racket to replace bootlegging. Under Joe B's command, the mob will throw its muscle behind illegal betting on horses and other sporting events. They'll do it using their favorite tactic, fear.
They were street smart. The amount of smarts they had, however, had paled totally in comparison to the effect that they had the ability to look you in the eye and say, I will kill you. I will put an ice pick in your nose. That's what gangsters did, and did well.
And Accardo gets word of a new racket from an ambitious hood named Sam Giancana. Like all self-respecting mobsters, Giancana's got a nickname, Mooney. Mooney means a little crazy, which Giancana can be.
He was ruthless, he was homicidal, he was a psychopath. And I don't think it had anything to do with his background or his intelligence or whatever. And the difference between you and me and him is that he could kill people and you and I wouldn't.
Just like his boss Accardo, Giancana is also a family man. He has a wife and 3 daughters to support, and he's interested in moving up in the world.
My father vowed that he was going to help his family, and that's what had happened. That became part of his drive in life, is to help his family, making life a little bit more comfortable for everyone.
Mooney thinks he can rise in the outfit with a new racket. He manages to arrange a meeting with Accardo and tells him about an untapped business he learned about behind bars called policy. Policy is a numbers game played mostly in black neighborhoods on Chicago's South Side. It works like this. The player puts a nickel or a dime on a number. The spin of a wheel determines if that number is a winner. It almost never is.
He realized that policy in numbers was not a 10-cent, 20-cent game. It was millions of dollars. He came out of jail and he went right to his friends in the mob and said, look, I'll take over numbers and they'll pay us.
My father had a mathematical mind like you couldn't believe, and he started figuring up dollars and cents and decided, well, this is the next resource I'm going to tap into.
Accardo gives Giancana his blessing to go forward and muscle in on the black bookies who run the policy rackets. After a series of brutal assassinations, nearly all the policy rings have a new boss, Sam Giancana. But the money policy generates is only a drop in the bucket compared to the cash that will come in when the mob takes its gambling act to Vegas.
Like Horace Greeley, the mob decided to go west, young man, which they did.
By the mid-1950s, Accardo's New York cohorts have created a hot new moneymaker in the desert city of Las Vegas, Nevada. What started with one casino in 1946 is now a mecca for gambling and vice. Accardo decides the time is ripe for the Chicago outfit to get its piece of the action.
Tony Accardo, to his credit, saw that Another form of gambling, which he felt was very, very lucrative, and one that was almost totally unregulated, was Las Vegas. Chicago went in there with a vengeance, and you have to remember the Chicago mob was the Capone mob and the whole myth and legend of nobody screws with the Chicago mob.
Just as the outfit muscled its way into policy, Accardo's men descend on Vegas, which quickly becomes a cash cow for the outfit. The boys skim casino money off the top, taking a secret cut of the gambling revenue before it's reported as income. By the late 1950s, the Chicago outfit is raking it in, much like in the days of Al Capone. And with Accardo at the helm, it's staying well out of the spotlight.
I don't know if Capone would have been able to do what Accardo did, which is to get out of bootlegging, which he would have had to have done, and to go into a very different form of money-making, which was gambling. Accardo was probably the perfect guy to make this transition.
But Tony Accardo is getting tired of the daily grind of running an organization like the Chicago mob. Even worse, the IRS has been looking into his tax returns. Sometime around 1957, Accardo decides it's time for a change. He sits down with some of his trusted pals to discuss how he can leave the daily responsibilities behind without deserting the outfit entirely. They devise a plan. Accardo will quietly remain in power, but let someone else run the business. His choice? Sam Giancana.
Accardo, I think, was very, very happy to let Giancana run it on a day-to-day basis. If you need anything, go see Sam. Accardo was very happy then to be the CEO, the chairman, to sit back and say, well, let Sam do it, and so forth. Although I don't think Sam Giancana ever did anything in his life without Accardo's okay.
November 14th, 1957. Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana is representing the outfit at a clandestine meeting of America's top underworld figures. They've gathered at this house in the tiny upstate New York community of Apalachin. It's the home of New York mobster Joe Barbera. But the parade of flashy cars heading towards Barbera's property has made a local police sergeant suspicious. He gathers a few of his deputies, blocks a road leading to the estate, and stages a raid. Mobsters in fancy suits flee into the woods. Giancana gets away.
He was a very athletic man. My father was a sprinter, and he got away from the police and everything else.
Others are not so lucky. More than 60 mobsters are stopped by police and questioned. Up to this point, FBI boss J. Edgar Hoover has denied that organized crime crosses state lines. He's called the mob a local problem and said there's not much the FBI can do about it. Now, however, here it is, concrete proof that mafiosi from around the country are linked.
That was the first public national convention of organized crime that was uncovered. People who didn't believe in organized crime, and now by organized crime I mean the mafia, they had a hard time explaining.
For J. Edgar Hoover, the incident is a colossal embarrassment. Within days of the Apalachin raid, Hoover strikes back. He launches an all-out attack on organized crime called the Top Hoodlum Program. G-men risk their lives to plant microphones in Chicago mob hangouts. Planting these microphones is, in fact, illegal. Hoover's top brass tells their agents that if the bugs are found, the Bureau will officially deny authorizing them to be planted. The most important mic is placed where the city's top outfit men meet on a regular basis in an office on Michigan Avenue. The feds call this microphone Little Al, after Al Capone. It is the FBI's first real window into the complex inner workings of the outfit. The mobsters have no idea they're being bugged. Business goes on as usual. The feds keep getting intelligence but can't use it in court since the surveillance is illegal. Over the next few years, Tony Accardo takes more time to enjoy himself. He gives his daughter an extravagant wedding. He takes his wife on vacation to Europe. he goes fishing with his mob pals, a hobby that has given him a nickname, the Big Tuna. Accardo only intervenes in the outfit's well-oiled machine when necessary. Sam Giancana, on the other hand, basks in the power of his job.
He told everybody he was the Chicago boss. He liked that. And he always took credit for the fact that he was the toughest and the biggest, and I don't believe Accardo minded that.
Giancana's bravado is a throwback to the days of Al Capone.
He was very flamboyant. He liked that show business stuff. He seemed to enjoy revel being on TV and seeing his name in print or hearing his name on the radio.
I remember an anecdote about Giancana when Frank Sinatra came to see him, and Giancana made him wait. And he loved that, to say to his friends, Frank Sinatra is cooling his heels, so to speak. He's waiting for me. You see, he loved that. It was all part of his sort of big-time image. I'm not just a neighborhood Goomba. I'm just not a gangster. I'm big-time.
So big that Giancana believes he can secretly determine who will become the President of the United States. To this day, the Chicago mob's role in the 1960 presidential election is one of the outfit's great mysteries. That year, Chicago's legendary Democratic machine, led by Mayor and boss Richard J. Daley, is throwing all its muscle behind the campaign of John F. Kennedy. Daley's coalition blankets the city, including the outfit's territory.
People that tell you that the mob did not have political influence in Chicago, and particularly the Democratic machine, the Daley machine, just don't know the city politics.
Giancana's boys are behind Kennedy, too. The outfit has links to JFK's father, former bootlegger Joseph P. Kennedy. The Chicago gangsters believe that if they can get out the vote or manipulate the vote in Chicago, the feds under Kennedy will go easy on them. On election night, Illinois is crucial in putting JFK over the top, and there are widespread rumors of rampant vote fraud in Chicago. Giancana is convinced Kennedy could not have won without the cooperation of the outfit.
You, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear.
Whether this was accurate or not, they believed that it was their effort in Chicago that carried the city and that therefore carried the state. They believed that they had a stake in President Kennedy's election.
Giancana believes Kennedy owes him. That belief, however, is not shared by the new Attorney General, Kennedy's brother, Robert. He has no intention of granting the mob any favors. In fact, he mounts a crusade to destroy organized crime.
As in every major community of the United States, there is organized crime in the city of Chicago. It's growing greater and greater every year.
They felt betrayed. They had worked for his election. They didn't expect to be the target of government investigations. They were.
Bobby Kennedy puts pressure on the FBI to get results. Soon, every part of Sam Giancana's life is fair game, including his many love affairs. G-men bug Sam's hotel rooms, even listening in on intimate moments with his girlfriend, popular singer Phyllis McGuire.
One of the ways they used to bait Giancana was to mention something they'd heard on a recording in a motel room. I know that for a fact, and Giancana would be livid because of this. They'd make some little caustic remark, or they'd say something that say Phyllis McGuire had said in the throes of ecstasy or whatever.
When I heard about them taping my father's bedroom in Las Vegas, that really turned me off. I mean, how low can you get? And I didn't think there would be anyone to stoop that low.
In 1963, the FBI steps up its surveillance. They call this new operation Lockstep. Agents follow Giancana everywhere he goes, staying close behind him each time he leaves his house, even tailing him on the golf course. Sometimes Giancana humors the agents.
Before he would do anything in the course of the day, he would sometimes hand the gentleman an itinerary and say, here, if you want to follow me here, this is where I'm going and what I'm doing.
But as time goes on, the pressure gets to Giancana.
It was a job with a lot of stress and strain. Along with that responsibility, we were also surrounded and involved with the government agents around our house, which made us more uncomfortable.
Giancana decides to take action in a very unusual way by taking the government to court. He gathers evidence, snapping shots at the G-men who follow him, and sues the FBI for violating his civil rights.
It was unheard of for a hoodlum to go into court and try to get an injunction against the FBI from following him around and things like that. He got a little too cocky, a little too arrogant.
When the case goes to court, the presiding judge agrees with Giancana. He orders the G-men to back off. Agents are told to limit the number of cars tailing Sam and to stay at least one foursome behind him on the golf course. Giancana has won this battle. But he is still under the thumb of Tony Joe Batters Accardo, who retains the ultimate power in the Chicago mob. The early 60s have been rough for Joe B. The IRS has hauled him into court for making false statements on his tax returns. He eventually wins in a second trial, but it's a 2-year battle and a close call. While Giancana has been living the high life, Accardo has been lowering his profile even further. He sells his flashy suburban mansion and moves into this more modest ranch house. Accardo remembers how national attention landed Capone in jail, and he's afraid that Giancana is going to make that happen again.
He brought heat on the Chicago mob, which is the very thing that Accardo didn't want. He brought federal scrutiny into the act, and that, of course, put pressure on the mob.
I mean, he should have been very quiet. The Chicago organization did not like all of this publicity, and in fact resented it.
In the mid-1960s, the Chicago mob, under the leadership of Sam Mooney Giancana, seems to have returned to the flamboyant days of Al Capone. The outfit's shadowy chairman of the board, Giancana's boss, Tony Accardo, is fuming. And the feds are more determined than ever to get Giancana.
We had spent about 2 or almost 3 years trying to get inroads into the outfit, trying to get somebody inside to talk. We were getting nowhere.
Starting in May 1965, U.S. attorneys get tough. They subpoena almost anyone connected to the outfit and haul them before a grand jury. Even Sam Giancana's girlfriend, singer Phyllis McGuire, is forced to testify.
Does this mean you're through with Sam Giancana?
No comment.
Are you coming back to be...
Finally, Mooney himself is called to court.
He was extremely cocky. Sam had been in a million grand juries. He wasn't afraid.
This time, prosecutors have a big surprise in store. They ask the judge to grant Giancana total immunity. Prosecutors know that if the mob boss cannot be held responsible for his crimes, he no longer maintains his Fifth Amendment right to avoid self-incrimination.
He said, "Mr. Giancana, I'm granting you transactional immunity. That means, sir, if you received a traffic ticket on the way into court today, you are immune from prosecution." It was as wide open as conceivable. If he'd walked in there and said, "I killed 12 people and here's their names," not only wouldn't he be prosecuted, we couldn't prosecute him for him. Nobody could prosecute him because he was immune.
Giancana now has no choice but to rat on his friends, risk prosecution for perjury, or keep silent and go to jail. Sam tells the grand jury his name, his address, and nothing more.
Sam had a code of honor. The honor he possessed was keeping his mouth shut. He would have never, in his wildest days, squawk or tell on anyone.
When Giancana went up there, I've never seen a more shocked expression in my life when the judge says, "Take him to jail." It was one of those things where he's in jail with the key in his own hand. All he had to say was, "I will testify," and then he would open up.
Giancana stubbornly remains behind bars for the duration of the grand jury, 1 year. When he is released on Memorial Day 1966, Sam expects to resume his duties as boss. he's wrong. Tony Accardo still holds the ultimate power in the outfit, and Accardo tells Sam he needs to lay low. Giancana leaves the country and eventually moves into an estate in Cuernavaca, Mexico. Back in Chicago over the next 5 years, Accardo appoints 3 different successors to Giancana. Each ends up in prison. Now in his 60s, Anthony Accardo has no choice but to resume a more active role in running the outfit.
It is not uncommon in legitimate business to bring back someone who can stabilize, and in illegitimate business, in mob organizations, it probably isn't too different from the straight world. You bring in someone who can stabilize, put it back together, calm it down, keep it quiet, keep the feds off your back, and keep the money rolling in.
Then, in July 1974, Mexican authorities kick Sam Giancana out of the country. He heads back to Chicago, no longer looking like a mob boss. But some believe he is ready to regain control anyway.
Giancana basically said, all right, I'm back. I'm going to take on where I left off. And Accardo basically said, no, you're not. And then they had some kind of a showdown, some kind of a falling out, where Accardo basically said, this town is no longer big enough for the 2 of us.
In June 1975, Giancana has been subpoenaed to testify before the Senate. He'll be facing a committee exploring charges that the CIA tried to get the outfit to assassinate Fidel Castro. The Senate will never hear his testimony. On the night of June 19, 1975, Giancana is in his basement cooking a late-night snack of Italian sausage and chichi beans. Exactly what happened next remains a mystery. What is known is that Giancana let someone into the basement. Then, while Giancana's back is turned, the visitor shoots him 7 times, including 1 shot directly in the mouth.
It was just a sad, sad wake to know that somebody had the audacity to unload 7 bullets into my father. Why 7? The first one killed him. It's really, his death was revengeful.
And it's doubtful, in my judgment, that Giancana would have let a stranger in the house or certainly turned his back on him. So my judgment is that it was the mob in Chicago who decided that Giancana coming back was threatening them and their own work there.
The identity of the gunman is unknown to this day, but the shot in the mouth seems to explain why he was killed. Someone was afraid he was going to talk. And if it was a mob hit, a contract on Sam Giancana could only have come from one person.
To have that type of hit, it had to come from the very top to order a hit on a big shot mobster. It had to come from somebody like Accardo.
June 21st, 1984. A frail-looking 78-year-old man enters a hearing room in the United States Capitol. He is Chicago mob legend Tony Accardo. Accardo has been the most powerful man in the outfit for 40 years. All his life he has shied away from the limelight. Now, in declining health, he is forced to testify before a Senate committee investigating organized crime.
I would sometimes have to repeat the questions to him so he could know what they were, because his hearing was not the best at that particular point. He did have a hearing aid. I leaned over to him a number of times to talk to him.
But anyone hoping that his testimony will unlock the secrets of the Chicago mob will be sorely disappointed. Accardo was questioned by Senator William Roth of Delaware.
What can you tell us about Giancana's murder?
I don't know anything about it.
You have no knowledge, direct or indirect?
None whatsoever.
Did you have anything to do with it?
No, sir.
Have you ever directed anybody to commit murder?
No, sir.
Have you ever killed anyone?
No, sir.
Wait a minute, Tony Accardo talking? I can't believe that, people are saying. But what he did, he orchestrated something very clever. He admitted that he was a gambler. Then he won money at the racetrack. His profession, he claimed, was a beer salesman. That's what he did for a living.
No, sir.
Now, again, what was your association with with Al Capone?
None association at all, just friendly. Hello, and how are you?
Are you aware that you were reputed to be his chauffeur and bodyguard?
No, sir, outside of the newspapers.
Once again, Tony Joe Batters Accardo beats the rap.
He skirted. He got him there. He fooled the government. He had a charmed life. He was always able to win out.
The government was not able to bring perjury charges or pursue any other challenge to the questions because they just didn't have any evidence that what he told them was not true. The fact that a senator doesn't believe they're true or that he believes that somebody committed perjury doesn't make it so.
Outwardly, Accardo bears no resemblance to the gun-toting thug who once earned the nickname Joe Batters and allegedly took part in the St. Valentine's Day massacre. But appearances are deceiving.
He was an old man, looked like a benign grandfather. And I'm sure to his grandchildren he was a benign grandfather. But the slayings that occurred in this city, the grisly mob hits, the corruption that existed didn't exist without Tony Accardo understanding what was going on and approving of it.
Accardo knows he won't live forever, and he's increasingly concerned about the outfit's future.
There was hardly anybody reliable that he could turn the mantle of leadership over to.
And for the Chicago mob, the times are changing. In the 1980s, a series of high-profile busts severely weakens the outfit's old power. The FBI breaks up many of their illegal skim operations in Las Vegas. A federal sting operation sends dozens of mob-connected judges and lawyers to prison. A federal statute known as the RICO law gives the government broad new powers to investigate racketeering. The result? Mobsters are going to jail across the country. The role of mob kingpin has almost become a one-way ticket to prison.
You become the titular head of the mob, and right away you become a target of the federal government. Surveillance, phones tapped, things like that. So a lot of people don't want it anymore because the heat that brings on. It's not worth it.
Accardo does not live to appoint a true successor. On May 27, 1992, after nearly half a century as boss, Anthony Joe Batters Accardo dies of natural causes. A rare achievement for a mobster. He was 86 years old.
When Accardo died, I think an awful lot of people were still trying to figure out where the leadership of the Chicago outfit really resided. And I personally don't believe anyone has offered a compelling answer as yet.
But the passing of the city's last true godfather does not necessarily mean that the outfit has died, any more than Al Capone's death did.
I receive inquiries almost every day of the week regarding organized crime activities, not just in the Chicago area, but throughout the country linked to Chicago. So if there is no more organized crime, then how are these people running gambling interests in the South and in the West that are related directly back to organized crime people from Chicago?
It's become really quite invisible. A lot of that's due to the fact that the government has made a lot of prosecutions and put a lot of people away. A lot of the old-timers are gone. Most of them are gone. But that was Accardo's dream, that you wouldn't know they exist. And by the time he died in 92, that was the case.
Allegations of mob influence in Chicago continue to crop up today. As recently as 1998, the head of the Chicago-based Hotel and Restaurant Workers Union is investigated for his alleged ties to the outfit. Eventually, he is asked to step down. It is not an isolated case. This kind of corruption and the violence necessary to keep it going is Al Capone's true legacy to the city of Chicago. The legacy is underground now, but still alive.
When you're not finding a body in a trunk every few months, people tend to think that organized crime is dead. And in reality, they have become so sophisticated business-wise and politically that they have become an integral part of the tapestry of what Chicago actually is. They are so ingrained that I think they are of a greater danger than they ever have been.
We try to make sense of organized crime. We pretend we understand it, we pretend we can make a chart and we know who's who and who's on top and who's below. But the truth is that these are just approximations of whatever it is. We don't really know the whole truth about organized crime.
The days when Italian Americans dominated organized crime are over. Other ethnic groups have muscled their way in, including Russians, Asian groups, and the South American drug cartels. Some authorities believe that the size and value of their businesses and the violence they cause make these groups even more of a threat than the old-school mobsters.
Discover more about this and every History's Mysteries topic at HistoryChannel.com.